Brimstone. Brimstone is one of the founders of the Valorant protocol and is considered the first agent on the team. Rather than being a Radiant like some of our other agents, he instead is a human who relies on advanced military technology and a variety of satellite-based abilities. Brimstone's office actually plays a pivotal role in Valorant's lore as it all takes place, since as the leader of the protocol, he's constantly in talks with all the different agents. So while we have only learnt so much about Brimstone himself, every patch we get various voicemails and emails to him that help us piece the worlds together. Here is what we do know though. In his past, Brimstone was both a firefighter and part of a military unit known as the Ragged Ravens. His childhood friend, Tariq Porter, was with him at all of these points throughout his life, however, Brimstone had to watch him die despite his best efforts. This event was incredibly traumatic to Brimstone, and he'll still be reminded of it even to this day, for example when he saw Killjoy get so badly wounded. There's a popular theory that KO has a connection to Tariq Porter, however I want to keep this video as focused on the facts as possible rather than getting too caught up in speculation. Brimstone also spent some time working for Kingdom, a mega corporation within the world of Valorant who essentially have a monopoly over Radio Night and everything to do with it. After the events of First Light, Brimstone would leave to found the Valorant protocol. Viper. Viper was a brilliant and acclaimed chemist working at Kingdom before helping found Valorant. She wasn't always about toxins and harm though. We know Viper actually used to heal with her talents. She was so successful in fact that she even became the first ever chief scientific officer for Kingdom's board of advisors. This success didn't go unnoticed however, and while working under Kingdom she was the target of an assassination attempt by the human that would become Omen. She managed to lock him in a chamber, then activated it, which transformed Omen into what we know today, giving him his powers but wiping his memories. Unrelated to this, Viper actually had another incident which truly set her down the path of resentment. This caused Viper to isolate herself and shed all the pieces of her life in the name of vengeance. In terms of the protocol itself, Viper has been there from the beginning, officially as a second in command and the second ever agent on the team. Also for the record, when we saw Viper overthrow Brimstone, that specifically took place on Omega Earth in the Valorant Legion. On Alpha Earth, Viper hasn't made any sort of play for the throne, nor are there any indications that she plans to. Omen. Omen, much like his appearance, is shrouded in mystery. He's the first Radiant to join the Valorant protocol, however he wasn't always like this. He was once a human, although he was always highly skilled and ruthless. Omen was actually an assassin even before gaining his powers. At this time he went by the alias Ghost and worked for an organization known as the Scions of Hourglass. Their purpose was to keep Radiant and Radiance a secret from the rest of the world. This is why Viper was targeted, because she was researching Radiant at the time and was considered a threat. The Scions sent their most valuable asset, Ghost, to eliminate her. He ultimately failed this mission however, being hit by Viper's toxins and becoming trapped in a test chamber. When Viper activated this chamber, Omen was ripped apart and became the Phantom we know today, powers and all, but with obscured memories. He had no animosity towards Viper for the longest time since he had no recollection of this incident. That was until the events of the Reckoning cinematic. After learning the truth about what happened, he was outraged and took it upon himself to leave the protocol until he considered himself an asset to them once again. While he was gone and looking into the Scions, Omen found Clove and brought them back to join the protocol. Eventually, he too returned and met up with Viper to talk and put this all behind them. Killjoy. Killjoy is just a human, but she has a brilliant mind and has created all of her own technology. She had all sorts of accomplishments and achievements at a young age, whether that was being nominated for awards or being the lead of Kingdom's R&D department at the age of 18. These accolades were mentioned in Fade's dossier on Killjoy, however Fade also brings up the implications of her technology ending up in the wrong hands. There's even a voice line where Reyna implies that one of Killjoy's machines hurt someone. Killjoy still claims to be responsible for building literally everything in this battlefield, and while that statement is a little unsubstantiated, we do know that she developed the portal that made it possible to travel to Omega Earth. That was with some help from Chamber schematics and Neon's energy. Beyond that, she's even helped other agents here or there, like creating Brimstone's bracer and Deadlock's arm. This is unrelated, but it's also worth mentioning that Killjoy is canonically in a relationship with Raze, and up until just recently, with the introduction of Chamber and Viper, this was the only confirmed couple in the game. It had a slow burn build up in game with teasers here or there, before being officially confirmed with a viral post on Twitter. Cypher. Cypher is a human information broker with a dark and mysterious past. His insistence on remaining anonymous makes him particularly tricky to learn more about, however he does let some things slip in his voice lines here and there. He definitely has a family, a wife named Nora and an unnamed child. He says himself he can't bear to feel the pain of losing them again, however it's not clear to what extent he lost them. It's a common interpretation that his wife and child are simply dead, however the way he speaks of them suggests otherwise at times. In that same voice line I just mentioned, he says that he must survive to protect his family, and Fade implies that he may be able to see his family from time to time, even if his mask must remain on. Like many of our other agents, Cypher dislikes Kingdom. For him, it's because of what they did to his hometown, roughly where the map binds now is. He did still have a safe house here despite the changes, however, as well as in a myriad of other places too. These were found by Fade, so it's likely Cypher has relocated to even further hidden premises now. Despite being pretty secretive himself, Cypher has become a constant in Valorant's main storyline. Due to his networking and surveillance skills, he's almost always involved in tracking down new information, agents, and anything else the protocol chooses to pursue. Sova. Sova is a human wielding radionite technology, and at first glance it's easy to paint him simply as the golden boy of the protocol. Even Viper outright refers to him as that, and it's clear that especially in the early days, Brimstone heavily relied on Sova's scouting abilities. He had a legacy and reputation for himself even before joining Valorant, and he was known as Villain, brother of Steel and String. Sova can definitely hold a grudge though. At some point in his past, he encountered a rift in his home country. It's likely this is where he met his Omega counterpart for the first time, and was one of the first times we had ever heard of an agent interacting with himself in the lore. Recently, in the While We Fight Back cinematic, we're shown an event where Alpha Sova wiped out Omega Sova's comrades and then cut out his eye. While talking about both Sovas, it's worth mentioning that while there will be inconsistencies in past depictions, devs have stated that going forward, Alpha Sova will have a blue iris and Omega Sova will have a brown iris. This difference happened at first light. Sage. Sage is a powerful Radiant, however her time before the protocol isn't super well documented. It's implied that she spent some time at a monastery in China before finding her way to Valorant. Despite being the 7th agent to join the team and not having a shared history like Brimstone and Viper, Sage has still risen up the ranks and is a natural leader amongst the other agents. She is also involved in recruiting some new agents, like with Skye, and took great interest in starting a Radiant training program around the time Neon was joining the protocol. Obviously, her healing and resurrection powers are essential in terms of keeping the team together. For a while in the lore, agents like Omen would allude to the fact that using this ability would take a toll on Sage, questioning where this life force comes from. That has started to pay off just in the last 8 months or so, when we saw these crystals appearing on Alpha Sage after she resurrected Killjoy. Then even more recently, we saw that Omega Sage is in a much worse state after overexerting her powers. It feels like we're just starting to scratch the surface on the true nature of Sage's abilities, with hopefully more to be revealed soon. Agent 8. Agent 8 is a mystery within Valorant. Every agent is given a number depending on their order of joining the protocol, so Sage is 7 and Phoenix is 9, but someone in the middle is missing. The only 2 official hints we got are from a dev AMA 5 years ago, stating that Agent 8 is not dead for now, and that they'll be revealed as soon as they get back, implying that they've gone somewhere. In the warm-up cinematic, which takes place on Alpha Earth, we can see a locker with a scratched out 8 on it, which does not much other than acknowledge their existence. Then in the Revelation cinematic, which takes place on Omega Earth, we learn that here in the Valorant Legion, the locker which should have an 8 on it is missing entirely. Other than that, when Clove was added to the game, they brought with them a voice line referencing the locker with the scratched out 8 on it. Despite asking, none of the other agents would respond to them when it was brought up. Phoenix. Phoenix is a Radiant with fire-based abilities, but there's a tragic backstory as to how he got them. He had a habit of sneaking out as a kid, so late one night he was on the roof of his school as first light was occurring. This is when he was struck by some sort of beam, which is how he got his powers. Not understanding how they worked or how to control them, he ended up burning down his school, which seems to be abandoned now as he walks past it in the present day. On the night Phoenix got his powers, his little sister Mary was also present. She loved her big brother and was worried that something might happen to him, so she followed him when he snuck out. This led to her being caught up in the fire, and she is actually scarred as a direct result of the blaze. In the aftermath of this incident, Phoenix was taken away by Kingdom and put in a special category of Radiant, eventually making his way into the Valorant protocol. Being separated from his family for such a long time started taking its toll on him though, and he began choking up in battle. Vyse was the first one to call this out, and after encouragement from Waylay, he finally reaches out to his sister and ends up watching her sing live, reuniting with his family for the holidays. Jett. Jett is a Radiant who can control the wind, enabling her to propel herself and other objects through the air. Before joining the protocol, she worked as a chef in a restaurant in Seoul. However, this establishment was destroyed in an incident with her powers. There's an additional player card from the Episode 7 Act 2 Battle Pass, however, that actually depicts Omega Jett attacking while Alpha Jett was still in her work getup. So she, being Omega Jett, is likely actually the reason for this incident. This wouldn't even be the only occasion where Omega Jett has caused issues in Alpha Jett's life. We all know the Duelist cinematic, and Omega Jett was actually the antagonist in this. Her mission here resulted in Venice Rising, forming the map that we know as Ascent. As a result of this event, Jett's face was plastered all across the news for being responsible, even though it was actually her counterpart, Omega Jett, who caused it. The world viewed her as guilty, even though she wasn't even there. That didn't prevent those close to Jett from distancing themselves from her though. They were horrified, ashamed, and even disgusted. These incidents in both Seoul and Italy have forced Jett into hiding even though she did nothing wrong. You can imagine how frustrated this would leave Jett, especially knowing that her counterpart gets to go out in her own world. This got to a point where she straight up told Brimstone that she was going to go out and live her life anyway, knowing that Cypher could simply scrub her face off the internet if Brimstone funded it. Reyna. Reyna is a Radiant and a proud one at that. She expresses strong beliefs about how Radiants are superior to humans, and she looks down on those who have to use technology to keep up. A lot of her voice lines draw a very clear line between Radiants and non-Radiants, to the point where there's a form of discrimination between the two. This is partially why Reyna has built up her sanctuary, a safe haven for people that she's saved from underneath Kingdom's microscope. In KO's timeline, which I'll talk more about later, it seems like Reyna becomes the leader of the Radiants in the aptly named Radiant War. That's very far away in the future though, and it's not clear what exactly set her down such a dark pathway. Reyna's ability itself is all about taking the life energy of others in order for her to survive. A massive part of Reyna's story, however, is to do with her younger sister, Lucia. Lucia has a similar power to Reyna, needing the life force of others to live, but she has no means to go out and get it for herself at such a young age. Reyna is constantly fighting to drain souls for the both of them and keep her little sister alive, as evident by her voice line.
For you, hermanita.
Raze. Raze is an engineer hailing from Salvador, Brazil. She's one of the most outspoken agents in the game against Kingdom, and in fact was responsible for driving the company out of her home state, forcing them to abandon facilities there. Eventually, she ended up prioritizing joining the Valorant protocol, however, leaving the door open for Kingdom to return to her hometown. At one point in time, after already being a part of the team, Raze managed to find herself stranded on Breeze. This was a relatively minor plot point at the time, and happened while the agents were taking some time off and partying in Berlin, but from there to an island in the Caribbean is a long way to travel whilst being drunk. There is a theory that when Raze woke up stranded on Breeze, that this was actually Omega Raze rather than Alpha Raze. There isn't too much to support this idea, other than the fact that there are so few reasonable explanations. However, we do also know that at some point, Omega Raze was spying on Alpha Raze and managed to sneak a broombot into her workshop. The way that Viper seemingly snatched Raze in the recent cinematic could also give some credence to the speculation, but otherwise that's all it is for now. Breach. Breach was born without arms, and yet the artificial arms you see today were made by himself, with some major upgrades from Raze of course. Breach likely met her while working a job in Salvador, and apparently whatever the two of them did involved breaking the law. As well as sharing a love of chaos, the two also share a distaste for Kingdom. Breach comes from a life of crime, to the extent that his whole family, the Torstens, were criminals. They were all sought out and punished for their actions, however the judge could not look past Breach's disability and took pity on him. This unwanted lenience only insulted Breach though, who used this as fuel to go on a crime spree and cause more havoc. This ended up being a little too successful however, and he became so notorious that he had to entirely disappear, after showing the world he was just as much a Torsten as the rest of his family. Breach's induction to the protocol was never outright shown, however it's said that it wasn't a smooth affair. His recruitment did however seal away his criminal records. Canonically, Breach is the tallest agent on the roster, and we also know that he is a metalhead and a drummer. Skye. Skye is a Radiant who is passionate about nature. Before joining the protocol, she was known as the Great Reclaimer, standing up against Kingdom and their environmental impact. Because of this, she was reluctant to join Valorant initially, not wanting to abandon her post. However, after Sage explains to her that this was happening everywhere and not just in Australia, that's when Skye decided that she would join. Skye actually has a great deal of power. The little wooden trinkets you see in-game are handmade by Skye herself and are used to channel her life-weaving abilities rather than the carvings doing anything themselves. On top of that, her ultimate is an instance of her actually manipulating the life on plant matter in her hands. While she sticks to simpler creatures now, like the hawk and Tasmanian tiger, there was a time when Skye tried to summon a dragon, although it wasn't pretty. Several agents, such as Tejo and Omen, acknowledge that Skye has a truly terrifying potential. Yoru. Yoru is a radiant with the power to open up rifts in the fabric of reality. Based on a voice line from Omen, it is said that Yoru leaves behind pieces as he travels. This can also be seen in the recent cinematic, but the true implications of this haven't been explored yet. Yoru's radiance can be tied to his ancestors back in the Edo period of Japan. A ship from this time somehow wound up in Russia, so it's speculated that, whether intentionally or not, the ship ended up there by traversing through a rift. Yoru believes that this ship has ties to his ancestors, so he broke into Icebox before joining the protocol in an effort to learn more about them. Within the map itself, Kingdom had been researching a set of armor, as well as a mask which Yoru ended up stealing. He is the only one who can use this mask, which seems to enhance his powers. Yoru also found that the ancient armor had traces of Radianite, even though Kingdom only discovered Radianite 10 years ago. He expresses a general disdain for the mega corporation, saying that they ruined Split, a neighborhood that he was once familiar with. Astra. Astra has connections with the Astral Guardians, an ancient race who worked to defend space and time. While we don't know exactly what they are, it's implied by Astra that they weren't human, since Guardians and people worked together to build Lotus. While she does have her own powers and is a Radiant, Astra's gauntlet helps her contain and properly use her powers, as opposed to being the outright source of them. This gauntlet is one of 3 ancient artifacts we've seen in-game, all of which have ties to the Guardians. The gauntlet in particular laid dormant at the bottom of a lake for a long period of time before Astra was drawn to it. These artifacts, including harbors, contain engravings of the language of the Guardians. Astra describes this script as not of Earth, and she's still learning to read and understand this ancient language. Whilst being a part of the protocol now, Astra still fulfills her duties as an Astral Guardian from time to time. One such example is around when the portal between worlds was being built, Astra took some time away to ensure that there wouldn't be any consequences down the line. KO. KO, or Kingdom Anti-Yield Operative, doesn't come from our Earth, but instead from an alternate timeline far in the future. He was built with the sole purpose of neutralizing Radiance, since in his timeline a full-on Radiant war has broken out, with Reyna at the forefront watching the world burn. KO was able to kill Reyna, however after seeing so much loss, he travelled back in time to try and prevent this war from ever taking place, arriving through a portal on Breeze. A lot of his voice lines imply that he had to go up against agents such as Astra, Reyna, Sage, Skye, and Yoru, and in many of those cases it sounds like the agents had become significantly stronger, due to either time or the pressures of war. So despite being built and programmed to kill Radiants, he now has to work alongside them for the greater good. Interestingly, KO's player card mirrors Brimstone's one that I specifically mentioned earlier. So as much as it is still only a theory, and I'm going to avoid mentioning those for the most part, this one is absolutely worth mentioning that KO could potentially be connected to Tariq Porter, Brimstone's dead best friend. Chamber. Chamber is actually just a human rather than a Radiant. In his past, he was a weapons designer, so with a lot of money he was able to custom build all of his own Radianite infused technology, which is how he is able to teleport. Chamber is incredibly familiar and even friendly with his mirrorverse counterpart on Omega Earth. In fact, the two even colluded for a lengthy period of time, resulting in them destroying the Radiant Collider on Fracture. The impact of this event cannot be understated, as many scientists were killed and the facility was abandoned entirely. If the protocol was to find out that Chamber was the one responsible for this incident, there would surely be trouble. After working with Omega Chamber, Alpha Chamber was given blueprints for a portal which would allow for travel between worlds. These blueprints are what he offered to Brimstone and the protocol to prove that he could be of use. Even still, Brim had his suspicions but eased off after Viper and Cypher both modded a chamber and came to the conclusion he wasn't anything to worry about. Whatever his true goals and ambitions are, Chamber is calculated, so he decided that all that loss on Fracture would be worthwhile. Neon. Neon is a Radiant with immense electrical powers. She worked for KSEC, a subsidiary of Kingdom, for a period of time before joining the Valorant protocol. In her time at KSEC, Neon had an encounter with Chamber, which left her distrustful of him. Although funnily enough, Chamber simply refers to this event as a misunderstanding. Even so, he was still keen to get her on the team, since her powers would be integral for the portal to Omega, which basically just needed a big battery. Neon's radiance takes shape in the form of bioelectric powers, although she struggles to control them. Her dad built a custom surge protector to help alleviate this, and this actually set him down a path of creating devices to help struggling Radiants. That idea of control is still integral to Neon's character and her powers though. After joining the protocol, Sage and Reyna argued over who was better suited to train her. Beyond all that, Neon's electricity was more than enough to power up the portal to Pearl. After this event, Killjoy even mentioned that the bioelectricity inside Neon's body is literally enlaced with the Earth's radianite mesh, which apparently shouldn't even be possible. For some more fun facts, Neon is canonically the shortest agent in Valorant's roster, but that doesn't stop her from being a skilled basketball player. Fade. Fade was originally a bounty hunter who combined her natural skills of tracking and finding people with her radiant powers to hunt down criminals for a living. Her radiance allows her to reveal one's worst fears to not only themselves, but Fade too. She's also done some freelance work for Realm in the past, who will pop up again later. Fade is currently striving to track down someone close to her that has disappeared. She has reason to believe that this person was taken, and she initially thought that Valorant was responsible for his disappearance, which is why she first targeted them. You see, Fade originally started off as an enemy to the protocol. In ominous emails, she threatened to expose their darker secrets and show the world who they really were, both individually and as a whole organization. This gave us agent dossiers for all existing agents back then, essentially blackmailing and doxing all of them. This was probably one of the most exciting agent build-ups of all time within Valorant, as not only were we getting teasers for our new initiator, but we were also getting massive lore drops for other agents too. Capturing Fade wasn't easy, as it took the combined efforts of Breach, KO, Chamber, Cypher, Sova and Neon just to get her back to the protocol. She was held in an interrogation room for a while, but after realizing that Valorant did not in fact take her mystery man, she agreed to work with the protocol, hoping this would bring her closer to finding him. Harbor. Harbor's only human, and all of his powers come from the artifact he wears, a matching set of bracelet and rings. The bracelet unleashes the force of water, while the rings control its temperatures and movements. Harbor originally worked for Realm, an organization which would retrieve and recover historical artifacts, taking them from thieves and the black market trade to return them to their country of origin. It's worth noting that on Omega Earth, Realm simply does not exist. Harbor over there was working with the Valorant Legion before the Harbor on Alpha Earth joined the Valorant Protocol. Anyway, Alpha Harbor had built up a reputation within Realm for being not just a great antiques expert, but also a force to be reckoned with on the battlefield and just an all-round good guy. While on a mission to locate a particularly powerful artifact, said artifact actually attached itself to Alpha Harbor's wrist. This led one of the Realm operatives to paint him as the bad guy, resulting in a months-long manhunt with Harbor staying one step ahead of Realm. One step behind that was Valorant, who were trying to get in contact with this legendary Varun Batra and his artifact. Harbor ended up joining the protocol to get away from Realm, and since then he helped to discover the map Lotus and has been working with Astra to better understand his artifacts. They actually tied his recent in-game rework to the lore too, as he was talking about his artifact acting up before they changed some of his abilities. Gekko. Gekko is a human bonded to 4 Radivors, and his lore mostly revolves around these little buddies. We do know that he grew up in LA, practically next door to a massive kingdom facility, which is where his creatures come from. Both he and his crew share a distaste for Kingdom, the former due to the impact Kingdom has had on the surrounding areas, and the latter due to being locked up and studied. Mosh, Dizzy, Wingman, and Thrash are creatures called Radivors. Their origins are a mystery, but we do know that they eat Radianite, and Kingdom were researching them under the guise of something known as Project Landfall. Some agents, such as Skye and Harbor, imply that Radivors are alien or not from our planet. While we never saw the bonding process between Gekko and his Radivors, we do know that he is now able to understand and communicate with them. Whatever these Radivors actually are, we also know that Gekko broke them out / stole them from Kingdom's facility. The protocol then helped ensure nobody who saw Gekko or his creatures would talk, and Cypher did his part to prevent any footage from surfacing online. Reyna ended up taking Gekko under her wing as he was introduced to the protocol, saying that he reminded her of someone, presumably Lucia. Deadlock. Deadlock is a human and originally was an operative for a military group known as Ståljäger or Steel Hunters. This group was hired by Kingdom to retrieve a Radivor bear and bring it back to the US. This mission didn't quite go to plan though. In fact, as soon as the team arrived, the bear had already broken free and was running amok around the facility. Deadlock was the sole survivor and even lost her arm in the process of eliminating this Radivore. Before passing out, she started a signal which thankfully Sova picked up on, since he and the protocol were keeping an eye on and tracking down things related to Project Landfall. After recovering, Deadlock actually got a brand new arm made just for her specifications by Killjoy. We already saw her being able to use her sonic sensors and gravnet before the incident, and she's clearly human rather than Radiance. Having said that, this arm is still a welcome upgrade given the circumstances, and it even allows her to use Annihilation. As a result of this traumatic incident involving Radivores, Deadlock absolutely detested Gekko's creatures initially. She even built 4 crates specifically for the purpose of detaining his little buddies. Thankfully, over time, Deadlock was eventually able to look past her own incident and trust Wingman. Together, they were even able to shut down an interversal portal. ISO. Before joining Valorant, ISO was a Radiant hitman working for the Scions of Hourglass, an organization hellbent on keeping Radianite a secret from the world. He was so successful as an assassin that people spoke of him as if he was a myth, talking about how he was bulletproof, taking out entire squads with 1 round. He even earned his own nickname, the Dead Lilac. We meet ISO as he's tying up some loose ends related to Project Landfall, after which he gets a new target to kill, Omen. Because of this, ISO actually let Cypher and the protocol find him, pretending that he simply wanted to defer from the Scions and needed protection from them. Although at this point in time, his true goal was still to carry out his mission and take out Omen. By the time he had his shot though, ISO actually ended up sparing Omen and fully defecting from Hourglass. Something about the brightness and pride of the agents here appealed to him, and he wanted to know what it was like to fight for something good. Clove. Clove is our beloved Scottish troublemaker who can bring themselves back from the dead and is Valorant's only canonically non-binary agent. The longer they spend in their junction between life and death, the harder it is for them to return. From Clove's teaser and campaign, we actually know more about their personality and interests rather than their radiance and backstory. For example, they're into urban exploration and now spend time running D&D campaigns for the agents. Their mum was a librarian, so Clove grew up absorbed by books, explaining where this fascination for fantasy came from. This passion for urbex and thirst for knowledge eventually led them to a library containing a valuable journal. This evidently had something to do with Radiance and Radianite, since the Scions were after it as well. They did actually succeed in killing Clove at some point, but weren't aware of their abilities. Clove often talks about their powers in a very casual and carefree way, constantly cracking jokes. They also bring their DM skills to the battlefield, with special voice lines introducing certain maps in their own fantasy fashion, which you'll either love or hate hearing at the start of every other game. Vyse. Vyse is a Radiant whose powers are centered around her ability to manipulate liquid metal. She once worked alongside Viper at Kingdom, however it's apparent that her line of research ended up being more to do with the interverse. Whatever work she did caught the attention of the Scions of Hourglass, who attacked and captured her. They also erased all of her work and documentation on anything to do with Radianite as per their motto. When she was attacked, Vyse's radiance had already manifested, evident by the claws at the bottom of this player card. They even went as far as to keep her as a prisoner at one of their bases, while also running some tests on and researching her. Vyse was actually only able to break free from her cell after some stray bullets hit the glass when the protocol initially raided Abyss. After this, she went rampant, taking revenge on the Scions, destroying some of their other bases as she went, before eventually being tracked down and joining the protocol after speaking with Omen. While Vyse doesn't respect Brimstone's leadership style and thinks Valorant's documentation on the interverse is simply amateur, she does agree to fully align her efforts with theirs once she was satisfied that the Scions were no longer a threat. Tejo. Tejo is a human with a massive ballistic arsenal. Prior to his reveal, it was implied that his ultimate affected the interverse, but so far this hasn't been expanded upon. Tejo quite literally dropped onto the Valorant Protocol's secret island and invited himself to join the team, much to the chagrin of Brimstone since these two have a history. We know that Tejo has a background as a veteran intelligence consultant, so he could have met Brim there in the military or potentially at Kingdom. Through a voicemail left for Brimstone in his office, it's implied that Tejo was there when someone that the two of them knew passed away. Whatever actually happened, it sounds like Brimstone should be expecting an apology from Tejo, but Tejo simply isn't that type of person. Instead, he is here to help the Valorant Protocol defend and hold off multiple Omega Earth incursions, which he claims that they have missed entirely. After joining the team, Tejo has also had a hand in recruiting new members to the protocol, despite having only just joined himself. Waylay. Waylay is a Radiant who can speed herself up or slow enemies down, but we don't know much about how those powers manifested. She came to save the day in her home country of Thailand when the protocol were on a mission there and Tejo called her for backup. These two worked together in the past and consider each other good friends. As far as her own story goes though, it actually seems like Waylay has a criminal background. She jokes with Breach about some of the jobs that they could have worked together, appears to be breaking out of some sort of armory here, and even has multiple territories seeking her arrest. Beyond her abilities, Tejo believed she would fit nicely in the protocol, since as he put it, they needed someone who could keep the younger ones in line, talking shit with them while talking business with Brim and Tejo. This worked out perfectly, as Waylay took pride in training some of the duelists on the protocol to work together better as a team. This is best reflected in game with agents like Raze, Phoenix, and Jett, who she has voice lines with.
That's leadership, Phoenix. That's quality. So good.
Veto. Veto is currently Valorant's newest agent, and he was introduced to the protocol once again as a recommendation by Tejo. To prove himself, he acted as a bodyguard for Phoenix's sister, Mary, and was instrumental in helping the team shut down Atlas's plans. As I said, Veto has a history working with both Tejo and Waylay, and he calls them simply T and W for short. While on a mission with these two sometime in the past, he lost a hand and an eye to a grenade. However, since his DNA seemingly merged with that of a Radivore, he is able to regrow both of those, and this gives him access to the abilities that we know today. This mutation isn't exactly a new development either, since it's shown that he was still working with Tejo and Waylay while having that signature blue arm. It's theorized that this Radivore could be somehow connected to an octopus, due to their regenerative abilities, the general shape of an octopus visible here, as well as of course the player card at tier 9 in his agent contract.